Well, I'm really, really excited to kick off this new series with you all today, Parenting Through the Phases. For the next few weeks, I want to talk to moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and brothers and cousins and sisters and anybody else who feels the weight of equipping an infant, toddler, child, teenager, student for life today. If all of us feel the weight, like in one way or another, many of us feel the weight of the next generation. We feel the weight, whether they're in our homes or whether they're our adult children who are raising our grandchildren, we feel the weight of what might happen with the next generation. So for the next few weeks, I want to just take some time to talk directly to you all in the weight that you might feel. Now, you might be asking this question. I'm glad you did because I'm going to answer it for you. Why would we take 4 weeks out of our time and talk about parenting? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, I want to ask you a question to answer your question, and here it is. What is the faith of the next generation worth? What is the faith of the next generation actually worth? You know what the answer is? The answer is everything. What is the faith of the next generation worth? Everything. Is it worth taking 4 weeks to talk about parenting so that we can understand what our role to raise people into the next generation of faith might be? Absolutely. Is it worth the weight of taking just a few moments out of our time to help parents feel equipped and ready to be able to tackle some of the really difficult things that we are tackling as parents in this season of time? Absolutely. Let me ask this question maybe in one more different way. To those of you that have children, or are planning to have children, or think you might have children, or know somebody who does, or you're an aunt or an uncle or a brother or a cousin or whatever else, when you think about the weight that it is in this day and age and the things that our kids are facing, isn't it worth having a conversation that might lead someone towards a firmer foundation in God? And I think the answer is yes. This is something that I told the staff when I first got here, that the faith of the next generation is worth everything, and we were going to be unapologetically for families. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish in the midst of this series. Now, again, you could say, well, why don't you just stick to the Gospels? Well, I think the Gospels actually have quite a bit to say about parenting. And throughout each of these messages I'm going to give you over the next few weeks, there's going to be a spiritual truth that will apply to you regardless of whether you're a parent. But all of my practical application, all my energy in trying to help interpret this is going to be geared towards parents for just the next few weeks. So even if you're not a parent, you're here supporting the next generation, and for that I am so very grateful. And maybe you're thinking about being a parent. I hope this doesn't scare you off. That's not my goal in the midst of this message. Now, there's something else I need to say. I got to tell you, when I first became a parent, I never thought in a million billion years that I would feel remotely close to being equipped to talk about parenting. In fact, I remember it was yesterday. I was talking to my wife about this yesterday, that when we were at the hospital and our son, who will be 14 tomorrow, that's just hard to, 2 days from now, 14 2 days from now, when they handed him to me and said, here's your son, I felt like the most insecure feeling I've ever had in my entire life. And one of the things that popped in my head at that moment was, you know what, just because I had a parent doesn't mean I know anything about being one. I was like, I had a mom and dad, but what am I supposed to do? And I felt like this, wait a minute, I knew my wife had it all together, but I had no clue what I was doing. You're going to give me this person? You're going to let me take this person home? Are you crazy? Do you have any idea who I am and how messed up my life is? You got to be kidding me. The other thing that popped in my head, because I was way more childish then than I am now, and I'm still working on that, but I said, just because I was a kid doesn't mean I know anything about raising one, right? Have you ever felt this before? You're trying to apply maybe some stuff that you went through when you were a kid to the way you parent now, and you're like, I don't know that these things compute. And I felt this immense weight, first of all, my wife just knew everything there was to know about this, so I felt really like I'm going to have to research and get myself up there. But we decided to partner together. We decided to partner together to make a difference in our kids' lives. And she, as a labor and delivery nurse and as a mother-baby nurse, and she had all of the physical growth stages stuff figured out, and she knew what they were going to go through and what we needed to do for their health. And so I was just starting seminary at the time, and I told myself I'm going to deep dive into everything that I can about how I'm going to, first of all, be the godly father my kids need me to be, but secondly, what is going to happen so that I can make sure that my kid gets raised into a future of faith? And so I just decided, because I'm more of a long-term guy, to focus on the end, that I would cast a vision in my children's life that I knew where they wanted them to end. And I knew, again, I had a finite amount of time with my children because I had just, I was in my early 20s. I hadn't moved out of the house that long ago, right? And so I just said to myself that learning to cast a vision for a child's future can take them further than you can imagine. And I decided that I would cast vision into my children's life about where I wanted them to end up. And I don't know that I did it right, and the case is still out because the youngest is still in 5, okay, and we got a long way to go. But this was my goal from the beginning, was that I would cast a vision for where I wanted my kids to end up, because I wanted my kids to end up in faith. I had been someone who left faith. I had been someone who'd walked away from the church, who'd experienced a really terrible season in my life that I didn't know how terrible it was when I had walked away from church and small group and family and God and all of those things. And I just didn't want that for my kids. And so my wife and I decided to partner together to figure out how to cast vision in our children's lives that they would end up as children of faith, that their faith mattered to us. And so what I want to share with you over these next few weeks is really just some broken ideas and things that I have gathered about how I made that happen, or how I'm trying to make that happen. And I'm not putting myself on a pillar as the perfect parent. Okay, that is not me. If you think that's what I am, I'm really sorry. You're going to be super disappointed. You can talk to my wife if you want. She might be a little closer to that than I am, but not me. No, what I decided to do was read everything I could find and go to every class I could take. I took every family discipleship class my seminary offered, even the ones I didn't have to take. And so I just want to take some time to distill some of that stuff with you over the next few weeks and give you kind of some big ideas that maybe you can grab onto. And the great thing is I've partnered together with our amazing kids director, Emily, and all the great stuff our small group leaders for your children are doing on the other side of this wall. And we have resources for you as parents or potential parents. We have stories for you as parents or potential parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles. You get all sorts of stuff you can take with you to help maybe lift the burden off your shoulders a little bit, the weight you feel about raising this next generation. So today, I want to talk about a really big word, a really important word, and that word is time. I want to talk to you about time. Now, let me tell you something that we all have in common when we talk about time. The number one question that we often ask about time is, what time is it, right? We got our watches. I got my Apple Watch on up here. Some of y'all got your Apple, Samsung, your Cisco, whatever it might be. You got your cell phone, right? And you're constantly like, what time is it? I got to know which way I'm going, and I got to keep my calendar in sync, and you got everything in Google, or you got it in your daily planner. Some of y'all got like color-coded stuff. I'm super impressed with how organized that you are. And we're constantly asking, what time is it? Because we got the next thing to go to, and then the next thing to go to, and the next thing to go to. In fact, during our time together today, you will look at your watch or your phone to figure out whether I'm doing okay on the time so that you will get out on time. And the funny thing is, we let you all out within 1 or 2 minutes, 1 to 3 minutes of the same amount of time every single Sunday, but you'll still check me. And just so you know, the staff put a giant clock right here in front of me to make sure that I don't go over, so that they will check me too, because this is the question we're asking. What time is it? And we've scheduled ourselves to be boom, 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 and sequential. And look, I know I use Acuity to keep my calendar together, and people can book appointments with me, and it's like one after the other after the other. I get it. This is the world in which we live. But what if there was a better question we could be asking? And what was the better question that we should be asking? When I tell you what it is, you're going to go, oh, yeah, that's the better question. Because just like our New Year's resolutions that I mentioned to you last week, we kind of already know what the answer is. We just choose not to do anything about it. And so I'm gonna throw this at you just for a few minutes, and it can stick or not. That's really your decision, but I want to give you a truth that is something that's really important. It's probably a better question that we should be asking, and you got to decide what to do about it. And here's the better question that we should ask. What should I be doing with my time? What should I be doing with my time? What is it? I got a set amount of time. What should I be accomplishing in that time? How should I be spending that time? Is there a better way for me to spend my time? And don't get me wrong, I am a creature of habit. I was an engineer before I was a pastor. I have a routine, and I get up at the same amount of time. I eat almost the same exact thing for breakfast every day. I eat lunch at almost the same exact time every day. I follow the same schedule week in and week out. I get it, okay? I get it. But this is still the better question. Am I using my time wisely? What should I be doing with my time? Now, believe it or not, the Bible actually has a lot to say about time. And so I thought just to begin this message with you today, I'd pull some really happy, fun thoughts to share with you from the book of Job. What are you laughing at? Yeah, those of you that read your Bibles before know that. Okay, just listen to what Job has to say about time. Check this out. He says, "My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and they come to an end without hope." Probably not going to find that on a Hallmark card or a calendar. You're probably not going to sketch that one down in your notebook and try to remember it, right? But he's not done. He says another one. Check this one out. "My days are swifter than a runner. They fly away without a glimpse of joy." Like, aren't you so glad you came to church today, right? That somebody could tell you these wonderfully happy, difficult things. Look, Job kind of had a rough outlook on life, there's no doubt. But the message and the principle of what he's talking about is actually not wrong. Have you noticed how fast time seems to be going? Like, I was doing some research on this week, and it's actually scientifically proven that the older you get, your perception of time speeds up. So that it feels like time is going faster and faster. Remember when you were a kid and you thought, Christmas will never get here? And now you're an adult and you're like, wasn't it just Christmas yesterday and now we're doing it again? You know what I'm talking about? So like time does feel like it's marching ahead faster. And the thing is, our time is moving faster and our time is marching forward. One of the things that we always, we kind of tie this to parents for a minute. One of the things that I've done in almost every church I've served, and we continue to do it even here, is a tradition that we give parents a jar of marbles. And as you were part of our baby dedication earlier this year, if you had a new baby that you brought in and dedicated, we did this for you. And if you're getting ready to have a baby, we're going to do this for you again really soon. But we hand them all a jar of marbles. And maybe it doesn't have this pretty of a jar. I stole this from Emily's office. That's why it looks so nice. But in the jar of marbles are 936 marbles. 936 marbles. Do you know why? Because there are approximately 936 weeks from birth to your 18th birthday, which is about the time that you expect your child to move out to their next thing, whether it be their job or college or whatever else, right? And this does happen when your kids turn 18. So you have 936 weeks with your kids. And what we encourage parents to do is every single week, like count it down, like if you got this late and it wasn't right at birth, you just count down to how many weeks you have left, and every single week you take a marble out of the jar and you set them aside. And every single week, as a week passes, you take another out and you place it in another jar and you count the time that you have left with your kids. Now, a really interesting thing happens. One, first of all, no, it does not create a deep sense of depression, and we're not trying to depress you or make you have to go to counseling by counting the time you have left with your kids. That's not the point. But something really unique happens in our leaders' minds and in our parents' minds when we make them go through this exercise. They start to value the time that they have left. And it's not really about, it doesn't become anymore about what they've lost. It becomes opportunity. That look how many opportunities I have left to influence my child. Now here's the other truth, all right? And then we're going to get to some much happier scripture, hopefully. But the other truth that we all have to kind of wrestle with, and this is, whether you have kids or not, what I'm about to say to you is relevant, okay? So just don't miss this. Time is ticking away whether you're watching or not. All right, some of y'all got the second hand on your watch that just keeps ticking. You can literally watch your time tick away. Your time is ticking away whether you watch it or not. And I think this is, again, particularly relevant for us as parents, but the truth stands true for all of us, that we have a finite amount of time. Now, there's another character in the Bible, not Job, who has a pretty amazing perspective on time that I want to give you some truth that he shared, and his name is Moses. And Moses had a really unique perspective on time because he had a really unique life. And believe it or not, Moses wrote a psalm. And I know you usually attribute the psalms to David, yes, but believe it or not, Moses wrote one. It's at the beginning of the second book. It's Psalm 90. If you want to go there in just a little bit, you can. Psalm 90 is a psalm of Moses. And what's interesting about Moses is he talks all about this idea. His whole psalm is about this idea right here. And I think Moses is actually a really good character for us to examine in this case because his perspective is unique. I mean, think about this for a minute. If you don't know Moses' story, he was actually saved. He was a Hebrew baby who was put in this basket to go down the river to save himself. And he was adopted by a princess of Egypt. He eventually became a prince of Egypt himself. He lived in the palace, so he went from being a slave child to living in the palace. He had this amazing high on the mountain life. And then one day he starts to realize that he's a Hebrew and that he's not this prince, and he kind of has this tension between the life that he has and the life that he should be living. And then he gets upset about how all of his people, the Hebrews, are being treated. They're being treated terribly. So he ends up killing an Egyptian, freaks out about it, runs out of town, and then spends the next 40 years, okay, 40 years doing nothing, doing absolutely nothing. When the sun would come up, he'd take the sheep out. When the sun would go down, he'd bring the sheep back. When the sun would come up, he'd take the sheep out, and the sun would go down, he'd bring the sheep back. And for 40 years, that was his life. So like he went, and then God decides to pluck him out of obscurity and say, hey, I got a really great plan for you. I need you to go get my people out. He goes and talks to Pharaoh. Pharaoh says no 3 or 4 times. God does some really amazing stuff. Pharaoh finally says yes, and Moses redeems and leads the people out of Egypt into and towards the promised land that God had for them. That was Moses' life. And so Moses had like these mountaintop, like lived in the palace, and he had this 40 years of doing absolutely nothing, and then he had like 40 more years of like leading the people. He had a pretty amazing life. And he's the kind of guy that if he can talk about time, I think we should listen. But I'm going to give you the answer now. So just in case you fall asleep or you decide not to listen to me for like the next 10 minutes or so, here's what Moses is actually saying, okay? He is saying that context is everything. Context is everything. He's going to show how all of our snippets of time, whether it be, our 70 or 80 years that we're given or how much time we have in our own individual lives, they are in a broader context of something, and when we put that in context, that context makes life make sense. And again, a guy who lived the way that he lived, writing this probably late in his life, I think he's got a really good perspective for each and every one of us. So Psalm chapter 90, or Psalm number 90, verse 1, it starts like this. These are the words of Moses. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Moses, looking back on all the stuff that he's been through and all the experiences that he's had, he said, you have been here and you have been consistent. Through every generation that's come so far, you have been here for us. You, Lord, have been. And then he continues like this. He says, before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Now this is huge. This sentence right here, from everlasting to everlasting, is really important for us. Let me tell you why for just a minute. So when we think about our lives, all right, aside from parenting for a minute, when we think about our lives, we put bookends on them, right? Birth and death, our birth certificate and our death certificate, and we think those are the bookends. And maybe as a parent, you take birth to college or birth to 18 and birth to job or whatever that might be, and you think that's your bookends. But what's really interesting that Moses says is like you put all this stuff before the mountains were in, from everlasting to everlasting you are God. And so what he's saying is that our lives are actually not bookended by birth certificate and death certificate. They're bookended by everlasting to everlasting with God in the middle. That our lives are actually on a much broader spectrum than we're usually willing to admit. That there's everlasting God in the center, and here we are as well. And that's what the bookends of our story are, is everlasting to everlasting with God in the middle. And so he's changing the context of how we're supposed to look at time. And when you think about it in this way, it might change the way you prioritize what you do. And Moses, looking back on probably times when he made good decisions and bad decisions in the middle of this, just wants to remind all of his readers in the midst of their prayer, hey, don't forget that life is sandwiched in between everlasting to everlasting with the eternal God in the middle. And then he continues. Our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures, yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and they fly away. Now, then Moses says a really confusing sentence. In full transparency, I almost skipped this because the English is just really complicated. And I didn't think I had time to kind of trot through the Hebrew and explain what this is, and I don't. So I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to give you my interpretation of that. And feel free to go and learn Hebrew and translate it on your own, but I'm just going to do this for you, and we're going to kind of fly through it. But this sentence, don't miss this. I know if you read this in your Bible now, you're going to go, this doesn't make any sense. So just let me read it out loud. It says this: if only we knew the power of your anger. Your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. Like, what on earth does that mean? What Moses is trying to say, if you look at the original language of this, because Hebrew to English is not a really great translation. In fact, you got to go Hebrew to German to English to actually get there. And this is what Moses, I think, is actually trying to say. If we could see God as he is, we would give him the reverence that he is due. Moses is talking about perspective. If we could see things the way they really are, if we could see God the way he really is, we would actually give him the reverence that he is due. And you think about this in the context of time, if we actually understood the way things actually work, we would give them the reverence that they're due. And interpretation means we can't. The translation of this is like, if we could only see, the reason he says if only we could see is because we can't. And that's human condition, okay? That's not your fault. That's not my fault. That's just the way that it is. We're stuck and sandwiched in this life the way we think about it. But Moses is saying, no, look. God has created you in the midst of everlasting to everlasting. And if you could just see that, you would think about your life and time and everything else differently. And if you could see God in the midst of all of this time, you would give him the reverence that he's due. And in other words, if we could take it one more step in translation further, if we could see clearly, we would live more purposefully. If we could see more clearly, we would live more purposefully. Later on in the New Testament, Paul says, kind of gives us this analogy that we're looking into a mirror dimly to see the way life really works. And I like that. That makes sense to me because a lot of stuff seems foggy and dim to me. But if we could see clearly, we would live more purposefully. And then he says the point. And all this stuff has been building towards the verse. This is the verse that I want you to remember. This is the verse that I wish I could just tattoo on all of you all, whether you're a parent or not. This is the meat. This is the centerpiece. Okay, so everything Moses just said is leading him to say this: teach us to number our days. Teach us to number our days, right? And not morbidly, not like, oh, woe is me, I'm running out of time, not like that, but teach us to number our days. Why? Well, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And what is a heart of wisdom? I don't know, but it's better than a heart of stupidity, right? And I would rather have a heart of wisdom over a heart of stupidity any day of the week. And I think what Moses is actually pointing towards, if you take all this context together, teach us to number our days so that we will live more purposefully with the days that we have. Teach us to live more purposefully with the days that we have. Now, I want to take this and put it directly in parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles' laps for just a minute, okay? Because you could, up until this point, you can take everything that I just said, and whether you're a parent or not, this was pretty applicable. But let me really tie this down for a minute. And moms, don't cry, and dads, don't hate me, and don't get all emotional. We got a box of tissues and stuff in a minute, okay? But here's the point. See, your time with your kids is ticking away. And I don't like thinking about it any more than you. I got 4 of my own, but your time is actually ticking away. And for those of you all that have adult children sitting in this room raising your grandchildren, you know what I'm talking about. But for those of us in the trenches with diapers and baby food and, middle schoolers, and, you can't have the same conversation with a toddler that you have with a middle schooler. Time is ticking away, right? Even though there's still weird smells and terrible, awkward conversations between the two of them, you don't raise them the same way because time is moving forward. And here's the thing that I want you all to remember, okay? This is the lesson that when I got this in my head about 10 years ago, this changed the way I looked at everything. And here it is. When you see how much time you have left, you tend to do more with the time you have now. See, it's not about morbidly going, oh, no, they're going to graduate soon. It's, I have time, and I'm going to do something with what I have. Here's something else you might not want to own, but this is the truth. At some point, every one of your children and every child in this church, whether you're a child or not, every single child in this world will eventually own their faith, their values, their decisions, and their relationships. Every single one of them. Every child will eventually own their faith, their values, their decisions, and their relationships. This is one of the reasons that when I came here, I sat down with Emily, and then after I eventually hired Andrew, I sat down with both of them, and I said, your goal, your number one mission, if you don't accomplish anything else, is that by the time a child moves from cradle to college or beyond, they own their faith. And you have done something about it. That was the exact sentence. Go ask them. That's exactly what I said to them. I put them at my desk and I said, you have to make sure you can help the kids in our church own their faith because they're going to. And I didn't grow up thinking this way. Now, don't get me wrong, and no disrespect to my Sunday school teachers and anybody else in the church I grew up in because you're probably watching, or my mom or anybody else. They did, what they knew, okay, and that's fine. But what I realized is I had this house of cards faith that someone had cobbled together for me, and I'd never learned to own it on my own. And so I just said to myself, if I'm ever going to be in ministry, when God said you're going to do this, I was like, okay, well, here's the caveat, like I can tell God what to do. But anyway, that I would do my best to understand that at some point, every child that walks through my church will own their faith, their values, their decisions, and their relationships, and I'm going to do something about helping them to do that. That this would be one of our number one goals. And parents, we want to partner with you to make sure that this can happen because this leads to their and our future. See, they're going to own the future too. At some point in time, and again, I'm not trying to twist this, okay, but at some point in time, The people that are in this room that are the seasoned veterans of life, we're the kids in Sunday school class, or we're the kids in children's church, right? And now you are raising adult children who are raising your grandchildren. And so you get this perspective that we will continually hand off the next generation ownership of our future. And parents, this is how it works for us. Now, I don't like thinking about this perspective because I don't like to pretend my kids will be babies forever. It's like when you get a puppy and you want it to stay in the puppy stage. It's the same thing with kids. You want them to stay little and not mean teenagers forever. Sorry, this is not how it works. I wish it was. There's no magic button for that. But, again, what I learned was if I can cast a vision for my kids' lives, and what you can learn is if you can cast a vision for your kids' lives that owns all of this and understands that this is where they're going, your whole perspective on parenting will shift. Your whole perspective on grandparenting will shift. Your whole perspective on being an aunt or an uncle or a brother or a cousin will shift. You're helping them prepare for their future. And here's something else, okay? Just twist this knife. If we're not working towards having the right kind of long-term influence, we're probably not going to get it. Now look, what is the right type of long-term influence? Well, it's that we actually have a relationship with our children so that when difficult things come their way, they feel comfortable talking to us about it. I want to be the person that my kids come and talk to me about sex and technology and relationships. My wife and I want to be the people that our children trust to have those difficult conversations that are going to come their way when they're not in our house anymore. And so what we're doing and what you should be doing is building towards long-term influence with your kids. And here's how you do that. Here's how you do that. You start to learn that every week matters. Every week matters. But here's the other part that I almost missed and I don't want you to miss. You don't have to get it all done in 1 week. You don't. You don't have to get it all done in 1 week unless you wait until the week before they graduate high school. Then you really do got to get it all done in 1 week. But if you start right now and you start thinking critically right now, it's never too late to start. You don't have to get it all done in 1 week. And if you start thinking about long-term influence and long-term vision casting in your children's lives as your goal, as your dream, as your vision, well, then you're going to end up where you want to go. But if not, you're probably not going to get there. You're probably just not going to get there. And the other thing to remember, because I'm the kind of parent that likes to do big things, and when we plan vacations, I'm thinking about, we're going to go to Disney, and we're going to ride everything, and we're going to, and I take a spreadsheet. Anybody else spreadsheeters when you go to Disney? I am. Every second of every day is planned out accordingly because it's an experience for the kids, and it's costing me like $1 billion to be there, and I want to make sure that I'm getting through everything, right? Well, here's the other thing that's really important to remember, the ordinary things. It's really usually the ordinary things that you do to make an extraordinary difference when you do them over time. Do you remember, the things that I remember most from being a kid? And I talk about them a lot, so you probably do if you've heard me preach before, but I know my mom and dad took me to Disney. I don't remember much about it. I know my mom and dad took me to, out west on this really long, Griswold's family vacation thing once. We were in a station wagon even. I don't remember a ton about it. But what I do remember is my mom reading scripture to me every night in front of our bed. And letting me, it was King James, but she let me ask questions. I remember my dad consistently showing up to make sure that first of all, I understood how schedule was supposed to work, but secondly, that he was consistently there. No matter how hard he worked, he always loved us. And that he made time for us because I knew time was such a valuable resource. And so they showed up and they were present. Even with their hard work and even with their chaotic schedules, they just made time for us. And I knew that was really important. It was those ordinary things that they did consistently for 18 years in my life that made me who I am today. Reggie Joiner puts this way, and Reggie Joiner, if you don't know who he is, he's kind of the founder of the Orange Movement, who is where we get all of our philosophy of family ministry that I'm going to talk about in the next 3 minutes we got left. All of our philosophy of family ministry comes from Reggie Joiner. He's the founder of who we use our curriculum for with your children, everything. He says it this way: some of the most significant gifts that you can give your children are what you give them over time. What you do consistently over time, week in and week out. Every single week, the consistent things. It's the reading the bedtime stories when they know that you're exhausted, right? It's the asking them how their day was and really meaning it and having a meaningful conversation on their way home from school or at their dinner table or at breakfast in the morning. It's the small things over time consistently that make the biggest impact. We put this a different way here, and it's kind of a philosophy that we have, But have you ever heard someone, for those of you that have middle school or high school students in your home, Remember they come in one day and they've changed their clothes or they've changed their hair, and you're like, what on earth is going on in my kid's life? And someone says to you, it's just a phase, don't worry about it, right? It'll pass. It'll pass, it'll be fine. They're just going through. Well, what we say is, it's just a phase, so don't miss it. It's just a phase, so don't miss it. The beautiful thing about your children is they're growing and changing every single day. And that, it's kind of scary sometimes, because just when you think you got them figured out, another 52 weeks has passed, and there's this whole new 52 weeks you got to figure out, right? And it's another parent-teacher conference with a new elementary school teacher or a new middle school teacher or whatever else. You're like, it's just never going to stop. Well, it's a phase. Don't miss it. And the beautiful thing that you have at your disposal, that the whole point of me doing this message series, okay, if you don't get anything else, I want you to hear what I'm about to say. This is it, so tune in. You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to do this alone. Now, I have made it my life's purpose in ministry to help families know that they can partner with their church to make a difference, that we want to be a part of what you're doing, that you are not alone. It takes a village. It takes an entire group of people. And the beautiful thing for me has been seeing how small groups are like raising each other's kids, or being with new moms and new dads as they have their babies for the first time. And that's already started happening in just the short time I've been here. It's been beautiful. But helping people understand they're not alone is huge. And what we really say is that we, the church, the lights, want to partner with you, the home, the heart. And when you put red and yellow together, that makes orange. We talk about orange family ministry. We want to partner with you to make a difference in the way that you raise the next generation, because the next generation matters so much to us. You're not alone. Here's the other thing, and I'm going to quit. You see, we get about 52 hours a year with your kids, if we're lucky, right? Barring Alabama football season and sickness and vacations and all other things, we get about 52 hours a year with your kids. You get like 5,000. So we want to partner with you so that you can do the things in the 5,000 that we can't do. And we want to partner with you so that we can do the significant things with trained volunteers in the 52 that we have that'll help you win as a parent. Now, step one in that, I'm going to give you a new resource every week, and this is it. Last slide, and I'm going to tell you something you can do. Is the Parent Q app. Now, if you've done this before and you've downloaded it and you've not looked at it, now will be a really good time to take it out. If you've never downloaded this before, it's in both the app stores. Get your phone out and download it right now. And in fact, what's going to happen is, in the back of the room, you saw the cool display that we have. There's volunteers back there, including our amazing kids director and our amazing student director, Emily and Andrew. They're back there. They want to have a conversation with you about your kids. And the goal for today is, for those of you that have children or you're planning on having children or whatever else, to get in there, understand how this partnership works through the Parent Q app, and then they're going to help you plot your kid on our big wall back there. And we're going to get all the kids in our whole church plotted where they are in their phase so that we can pray for each other and partner with each other, but also so that maybe you can start to count the time that you have left and make it count. So I want to pray for you, and then I'm going to dismiss you. We'll play some music. We're going to turn the lights on, and you can go back to the back and ask as many questions of those awesome directors as you want, and then you can get your kids and go watch the national championship tomorrow, right? Roll Tide. So bow your heads with me. Let me pray, and then we're going to get out of here, okay? Gracious God, first of all, thank you so much for trusting us to raise little human beings. Even if we don't have kids, if we're a part of this church, we're in a church that has kids, and we're in a church that has moms and dads, and we are here because we love them. And we love the fact that you have entrusted us with the next generation. God, we can't do this on our own. As moms, as dads, as a church, we can't do this on our own. The beautiful thing is you've told us we don't have to. And God, we want to be the kind of church that helps parents, moms and dads, and aunts and uncles. We want to help them win because we care about who they're raising. So God, help us to be good partners and good stewards of the time we have with their children, but also help us to partner with moms and dads and help them to be the moms and dads that you want them to be, that they want to be, to make a difference in this next generation. God, we love you. We ask all this in Christ's holy name, and all God's people said, amen.